Hello, this is a March 22 update on economic directions from advanceprojections.com. What we're going to review here is quickly go over the latest Federal Reserve actions and what to expect later on in 2022. First, some highlights. Our forecasted Fed moves have materialized. I'm sure everybody realizes by now Fed raised interest rates by a quarter point earlier in the middle of March. The Fed chairman and the Open Market Committee have made much more clear what their script is going to be for the balance of the year and what is going to be going into their thought processes as they monitor what's going on with the economy and inflation. COVID may now be considered to be in remission. It's not gone, but things have been winding down quite directly over the last few weeks. There are still pressures on the economy, old and new stuff, as a consequence of our pal Putin over in Russia and his adventurism in Ukraine. The equity market bubbles started to deflate at the beginning of the year. They're in a bit of a pause right now. So, as I just mentioned, Putin's invasion of Ukraine has added to economic pressures here with an oil price shock. Oil went from actually down in the 60s in November, back up to the 80s, and then pushed over 100. It's now at about $110 a barrel. This is not a pleasant consequence for anyone that uses oil for energy. There are residual supply chain and labor shortages. There are now over 11 million job openings that businesses are still trying to fill, while unemployment has moved down to 3.8%. So this means that, these employment figures will focus the Fed on fighting inflation, and inflation in February came in at almost 8%. The jobs report continues to surprise people. March numbers were muted, but still improved the jobs picture. And as I mentioned earlier, the Open Market Committee meeting in March 15th and 16th formalized what the Fed had been telegraphing for months, that they were going to start raising rates. So they bumped it up by a 0.25%, and they said there's going to be probably 6 additional increases in the near term, i.e. in the remainder of this year. The equity declines that began in January have paused for the moment. We think that's just they're taking a breather, but there's no really good news on the horizon for stocks. So in general, the equities indices should continue to decline here very soon. So, the Fed is in charge as much as they can be domestically. They've got the steering wheel in their hands. Internationally, the external forces on the economic freeway, you never know what crazy stuff is going to come blasting by you, but they're behind the wheel right now. In 2018, when the Fed started to adjust rates upwards, it came kind of as a surprise to most investors. And the Fed's motivations were never, clearly stated overtly. We knew that they were going to try to, get back to normal interest rate levels, but they didn't really telegraph the moves, and people played the guessing game. What will the Fed do next? And equities markets responded with a relatively sharp 20% decline back in December of 2018. And that really, it's both aggravated and scared a lot of people. At that time, we actually wrote to Chairman Yellen at the time and probably many others did the same thing, suggested to the Fed that they provide a script for their planned increases, and doing so would better serve everyone by allowing time to adapt and adjust to a known path for interest rates. So this time the Fed seems to understand the necessity for a visible path. And that is kind of revealed in some pretty extensive remarks that Chairman Powell made to Congress. We have a slide here that I'm not going to read out loud, but I'm going to hold it up here for about a minute so you can read exactly what he said, and we'll give a brief interpretation afterwards. Notice that the chairman is focusing on setting expectations, realizing that, they are in control, but, it's not going to be an ability to fine tune what happens. They basically do know that they have to fight inflation by increasing rates, and they're not going to waffle or hesitate. They're going to base what they do on numbers that are going to be coming in basically month by month. Now, what this means for equities: when interest rates go up, stocks go down. Stocks have been very high. This is, historically record levels and historic deviations from the mean. Okay, so you see back after the 2000 recession, prices were here, fell by 50%. The Great Recession, prices were here in the hot zone just barely, and fell precipitously when the real estate markets crashed. Okay, so we've danced around over the last 15 years back up over the mean, well over the GDP, which is this line. And, now we face this historic gap between where equities were just at the beginning of January and where they should be. And if you compare it against the GDP, the gap was even wider. This is what Warren Buffett uses, right? It's the Buffett indicator. And for the Buffett indicator to return to normal, that means the S&P 500 has to be down in here someplace, which is near 2000. So that would be a pretty nasty surprise for everyone that's got, retirement accounts, massive accounts in stocks and so forth. So beware. We have an extreme risk situation. Equities are still vastly overvalued, even with the recent nearly 20% decline since the beginning of the year. Distillation is, of course, the economy itself isn't out of the woods yet, and the equities markets remain way too far ahead of where they should be. Fed monetary policies, these ongoing interest rate increases that we should expect, should further mute exuberance in equities, and they'll be set in motion during the next several quarters. We do expect to see that COVID issues will finally decline to a tolerable level of risk inside the US by the middle of this year without another significant wave. We still have son of Omicron floating around out there, but initially it doesn't look like it's going to be a big threat. Thanks for listening. This is as brief as we like to give it, but if you appreciate this video, please give it a thumbs up. Consider subscribing to the AP Newsroom YouTube channel, and you can get free access to a full member report via first link in the description below. Also consider joining our free economy monitoring group on Facebook. It's not filled with noise. We make an occasional post there, and we're looking really for responses to those posts. So please leave comments with your thoughts and questions here in our YouTube channel and or in our Facebook program.